Hello, this is Wes Eaton. I'm an assistant research professor at Penn State, and I'm going to talk about the USDA funded Water for Agriculture project. What we're doing with this project is simultaneously fostering, that means bringing together new stakeholder groups, supporting those stakeholder groups, and studying the stakeholder engagement process and outcomes in agricultural contexts on topics of water quality and quantity, 5 project sites and stakeholder groups in Arizona, Nebraska, and Pennsylvania. I want to focus on the social science research component of this, and our research approach is a mixed method comparative longitudinal research design, and the figure here is our conceptual framework for studying change through engagement. Our key research questions are whether, how, and under what circumstances or conditions does the stakeholder engagement process lead to what sorts of change. The lesson or learning I want to point to in this lightning talk is the idea that social science for stakeholder engagement requires marrying this objective agenda that's studying change through engagement with an action-oriented agenda that's focused on supporting the stakeholder engagement processes. Because as social scientists participating in the research, we're also participating in the engagement process and having an impact on that process and outcomes. So 3 quick insights. First is that our interviews we conducted to collect baseline data to measure change through engagement are also, as importantly, about relationship building with the stakeholders we're interviewing with to manage this uncertainty around forming new groups to work together. Also, with our engagement process, holding to principles of collaboration, we focused on the process versus predefined outcomes. And doing this in practice was quite terrifying for facilitators and stakeholder participants because without having a predefined goal, the question of why are we here, which we hope to be solved through dialogue to uncover problems, was hanging such that the specter of failure or the groups falling apart was quite intense at the beginning. And finally, some points as to how do you do studying the engagement while the engagement is unfolding. And with people who recognize that they're both part of an engagement process to address practical problems, while at the same time participating in a study to address the science of engagement. Some points here are the need for managing timing across the group's need and the research needs, the time requirements to participate in the study and participate in the project, who owns the data, and then this idea of a guinea pig syndrome, folks reflecting or recognizing they're being studied while they're participating in their project. Thank you.
So I have a quick question. Thank you, Wes. That was really interesting. Could you briefly comment on how you handled differences across the your 5 different stakeholder groups? Whether you were trying to focus each one on the unique elements of a particular locale, and whether you develop things organically depending on those local differences, or you try to maintain uniformity and representativeness across all 5 in a similar way.
Well, the common factors was water quantity and quality. So we wanted to find unique but comparable places, geographically distinct. And what we wanted to hold constant was the process, this process model we've been developing and talking about and training internally on ourselves on this. But as far as specific the composition, we did stakeholder mapping to start with, and then at that point, each group took its own life on, because after the interviews, we got to know who was more likely, who indicated willingness to be part of these groups. But throughout the 18-month process of these 5 stakeholder groups meeting, as part of the engagement process, they're asking themselves who else should be in the room. So they've evolved into different, but if you put them each in a pie chart, they have different balances of producers, for instance. One of our project sites doesn't have a single producer on the stakeholder group. They all agricultural professionals, and other groups are at least half producers. And it's very interesting what you would call progress out of the one group versus the other. Uh, and this reminds me of the previous talk, because what I was thinking about with the stakeholder question is this question of capacity building for stakeholders, and to what end a project wants to build stakeholders' capacity to participate in these things. So we're having to do much more capacity building to bring the producers, for instance, in Pennsylvania, into conversations when they feel like they've been under the gun and in the crosshairs for a while, versus in Nebraska, where they feel very much empowered to participate in these things because of the natural resource districts and governance there. Thanks, Andy.
Charlie Borsmeyer, just a quick question. Have you had to tangle with the issue of boiling off complicated processes or data sets or dynamics into a way that the stakeholders can better understand them? Or not, or is it premature for that, or that's not even your domain? Or could you tell us about that?
Yeah, great question. We have 3 teams that are supporting each engagement site. We have an engagement team, there's a national team, a social science, social behavioral team, and a biophysical science team. And so as the topics emerge through dialogue, they also emerge from the interview findings around, let's say, a scientific issue. Let's say in the Central Platte, they're interested in invasives and phragmites in particular. Now, each group holds their own bit of special expertise here, not to say just because I'm calling them stakeholders, they are not themselves experts, but there is a lot of that interfacing of what questions do they have, and then how do we have dialogue about what a model, for instance, in Chesapeake Bay watershed is. And it's not like, we bring an expert in to give a lecture to a group, as much as we invite biophysical experts as topics emerge to join meetings with groups to engage in dialogue and answer that group's questions. This goes for social science as well. The surveys, we've been doing mail surveys and talking about what a sample population is and talking about what a statistically significant finding is for those conversations. So yeah, it's constant.
Yeah, it sounds that way. Sounds that way. Thank you. Yeah.
And a problem where an issue right now is, how much do we want to say, well, the group feels this way about it? Do we intersect as scientists and say, well, actually, from a social science perspective, I'm really glad you want that question in the survey. But if you ask people to compare incentives versus deregulation versus no regulation, and you publish that information, are we reifying an existing norm in an area, or are we exploring it scientifically? So how do you talk as scientists about being unbiased about science without coming from a privileged position is an ethical dilemma.
Yeah, good question. That's a good question. Yeah. So I see what you're saying.
We have a question from the chat. Could you, and it's a great question, could you explain the guinea pig syndrome? How did you identify your stakeholders are feeling that way, and how did you manage that?
You could tell in nonverbal, as we talked about the project, and as we had the first introductory meetings, and we talked about, well, there's a social science research component. We use words like, we want to learn from you, these innocent sounding language. Well, how are we learning from you? Well, we're going to be doing interviews, and you're going to fill out periodic surveys throughout the process. So you're studying us, a bunch of psychologists are going to study us. So that was what just on this slide, I call the guinea pig syndrome. We managed it by trying to be as transparent as possible, and also trying to keep up on bringing back all the data they're giving back to the facilitators and back to the group. Holy smokes. I mean, if you want to just publish some papers and get yourself tenure, this is not how you do it, people. And so it brings in all sorts of questions about what rank of kind of where you are as a researcher, what capacity we have to do this feedback, the line between extension and outreach, and ivory tower work. So
yeah,
transparency is how we managed it.
We could have an interesting conversation about the importance from tenure. This was great. Again, I think we need to move on.